YouTube with the graphic. What graphic is that? Jane Zoom.
Well, we have quorum, and it's 7:02, so
Okay.
we can start.
All righty. I'd like to call our full design review board meeting to order. We've established a quorum. I'm not sure that I can see them all, but I'm told that we have a quorum of, is that 4 or 5 members?
We have 4.
4 members, okay. With that, the first order of our business this evening is the approval of our agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I'm only seeing, okay, there you go. Thank you. With that, I would like to ask for approval of design review board minutes for the following meetings: February 9, February 16, February 23, March 2nd, and March 9 design review board meetings. Is there such a motion?
I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any? Thank you very much. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any members' comments unrelated to tonight's agenda? Seeing or hearing none, we'll begin with our applications. The first application is Saffold Way. Is our applicant here?
I'm looking for the
This
applicant.
is an appeal?
Yes,
Okay. As in-
looking for our applicant.
Okay.
I don't see her on here. We might want to go to the next one.
Okay, we'll proceed to the next item on the agenda, which is Whitney Park East Cluster Stream Restoration.
Okay, we do have the president of Whitney Park East. We're going to unmute her now.
Hi, this is Jackie Clark. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Okay, great. And hopefully Jack Merritt with Fairfax County is also on. He can talk through the plans in more detail, but essentially what the application that I submitted with the agreement of 2 other clusters is to allow Fairfax County to restore the creek that runs between, or kind of on the easement they have between all of our cluster properties. It's been issue really for the last 2 decades. I think even in the late 90s, the president then went to Reston and asked them to see if they could help reduce the erosion happening in the creek. It's a lot of the backyards of our houses are slowly eroding into that. And while this Fairfax County solution won't fully fix that erosion problem, it definitely helps the erosion of the creek. It also will address some dangerous trees that are in the creek that in the past we've had trees fall on houses or or damage property that have been on the slopes of the creek. So hopefully it will make it safer and reduce erosion behind all of our townhomes.
You said there's going to be a representative from Fairfax County to kind of walk us through the plan?
Yeah, if you can unmute Jack Merritt,
He's
if you
he's unmuted.
Hi, Jackie.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Thank you all for having us tonight. If you scroll down a few pages there, I saw it a second ago. I think it's 29 on what you're showing, the next page. Yeah, so if you pan over a little bit more to the right, our proposed access is going to come off the end of Chestnut Burr Court to get into the channel and do the work and access the channel. We are proposing access to run up and down the channel for the reasons of minimizing impacts to existing trees. We started our engagement with the community back in 2019. We coordinated and consulted with Wetland Studies and Solutions. We're also on the call this evening to do a design project for this channel. As Jackie mentioned, there's a storm drainage easement along this channel, and this outfall restoration program that we have, I apologize for that. This outfall restoration program that we have is for, as part of the county's stormwater program. So this is fully funded, through the real estate tax assessment and the stormwater fund that you all pay into. WSSI surveyed 259 trees, 4 inches in diameter and greater as part of their survey and topographic survey when they did their initial data collection in the field. We're proposing to remove 41 of those 259 trees. Most of those trees are what we would consider hazard trees or become hazard trees because of the construction. I know that tree loss has been an issue along this channel because of the erosion. So, we've obviously taken that very seriously as part of our coordination and design effort. Other than that, that's all I have, and open it up for questions.
All righty. Maybe we'll start with Karen, or you have any questions about the application?
Did WSSI do the initial work? Was there initial? This is a fix up of something that was already done.
The initial work would have been done as part of the subdivision development. So this would be, to my knowledge, the first
Okay.
first restoration effort along this channel.
All right. I live in a cluster that they remediated our stream, and they did a beautiful job. So I think we're in good hands.
Was that a WSSI?
Yes.
John Connolly, if you could unmute him, he's on the call as well. He represents WSSI, is on the call tonight.
Yeah.
He's being unmuted.
Oh. Hi, Karen. This is John Connolly. Good to hear from you. Good. No, this wasn't part of our original restoration in Reston, but we did take the same approach and methodology that we used at Waterview cluster behind your place.
Mm-hmm.
Following the restoration, everything will be revegetated with the native seed mix and the 1 gallon and tubeling trees as well.
How long a project is this?
Timing or length of construction?
Well, from start to finish.
Well, we're proposing to restore approximately 650 linear feet of outfall channel. Construction duration should take approximately 2 months. Forgot to add that we have coordinated with the other 2 clusters that aren't necessarily, their property doesn't encompass the channel, but they're adjacent to it and close enough to it that it's going to have an impact on them, during construction. We've engaged with them and held several community meetings to keep all community members engaged in the project.
So right now we're just looking at one piece of it, right?
You're looking at the whole project.
I'm looking at the whole project.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Maybe, if you zoomed out another click or
Oh,
two, you could see the whole thing, but
Yeah.
it doesn't go to.
I look at it on my computer, it's in pieces.
Just for
Oh,
clarification, the application is for the full approximately 650 linear feet, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Karen, any other questions?
no, really not.
Okay. Dan, anything?
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Michael?
Just a point of clarification. You had mentioned that there would be revegetation. I think I saw a planting plan at the tail end of your package. And you said you were coming back in with native species, et cetera?
Yes, sir. That can be
Yes.
found second to last page there. The next sheet, 36 on there you go. You'll find our seeding schedule and our planting schedule with the native trees and shrubs that will be installed post-construction.
Wonderful. And you were, I missed it in your original discussion points there. You said total removals were on the order of 40, is that right?
Total removals on the order of 41, and then revegetation's 453 stems.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
That's so that you would hopefully have an appropriate number left over after some of them don't make it.
Correct. Yeah.
We
Sorry,
do
go
plant, excuse me, we do plant at the higher density to a natural mortality.
Do you still, this is not a stream restoration, but do you still have 10 years to follow it, or?
So this is not associated with the stream mitigation bank where we had a 10-year obligation to
Okay, all right.
maintain. But Fairfax County and Jack's group, they do an annual program.
Yeah. So I manage the outfall restoration program as part of Department of Public Works' Maintenance and Stormwater Management Division. We do have a Corps of Engineer permit, so we'll have a 3-year obligation per our permit to make sure that we meet all of the permit requirements. And then after that, the project will enter into our maintenance program and we'll maintain it in perpetuity, similar to how we maintain a pipe system, a structure, et cetera, that's within county easement. This program is not the same as the mitigation bank for Reston.
Yes, I understand.
Thank you. We had one party to this that,
He's here. He's
Okay.
he's unmuted.
okay. Good evening. Could you just explain briefly your 2 points that I had
Yeah,
at least
sure.
2 points in your letter?
Yeah, sure. My name's Brian Delgad. I live in the Whitney Park cluster. We moved in May. We hadn't had previous involvement when any of the meetings between, sounds like the Reston organization and the Whitney Park cluster have had some previous discussions on this. So there were 2 main issues that we wanted to raise with the proposed plan. If you look on slide 29, the main overview, it's particularly with that left side, it's the secondary storage and staging area where equipment and stuff will be stored, and that's going to be, yeah. So if you scroll down to it on the left side there, yeah. So that's going to be right between two of our houses, and I think it was on slide 17 where we actually had some of the pictures that we took. So we were a little surprised when the lines of demarcation went up, because again, we'd moved in May, and nothing about this project had been relayed to us. But if you can see from slide 17 there, the picture, the fencing that will go up for that staging area will completely block our access to our backyard. For normal day-to-day stuff like lawn, garbage going in and out, it prevents that. But I think more importantly, although less likely, is that's our only way in and out of there. So in the case of emergency, we wouldn't be able to get in and out of the backyard. Secondary concern is you can see the stone pathway there, which will lie in the area. I'm not entirely sure the type of equipment that will be staged in that area, but if it's heavy lift equipment, there could be potential damage there that we'd like to see or hear discussion about how that might be mitigated or repaired after the work is done.
Yeah, so that access point, and Brian, thank you for the questions and concerns. That access point is not going to be used on the project. We had left it in there as kind of an option because where we are accessing up and down the existing channel, we didn't know if the contractor would be able to get in and do all the work from the downstream access. It's not anticipated that we're even going to plan to use that access. It's still on the plan as an option in the event that we need to. We do have a storm drainage easement that cuts in between your house and the adjoining, I guess, block of homes. Typically with something like that, though, we're very mindful of obviously, your property and your home. So if we needed to, in the event that we did need to use it, we would be flexible and be able to adjust that that area of temporary fencing to allow you access in and out, and we return any disturbed areas to back to how we found them. So in this case, the stone patio would be replaced if something were damaged. Again, it's not anticipated that we're even going to use this as an access, though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as long as you guys are willing to work with us for access to the back area and that any damage will be replaced, then I think that addresses any concerns we have with this.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
my name is John Farrel. I am the president of the Colonial Oaks Cluster. We're one of the two adjacent homeowners associations. We support the application when we're asked DRB to approve it. The undercutting of the banks has prompted us to have to take down some trees that were undercut because of the erosion of the banks. We got approval for that last summer. And the undercutting of the banks, if we can go to 29, I believe. Can we show 29 and pull in tight? It actually is starting to erode the bank to the point that it, and the relevant homeowner is actually on the call. We can slide to the right a little bit. There we go. You can see just there's a yellow highlighting, and just to the right of that is where we had to take down a tree, and where the bank is cutting pretty close to our unit owners' homes foundation. So we see this project as being essential to the preservation of the property values of our cluster in general and that homeowner in particular. And we would encourage the DRB to approve the application. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other comments or questions? I would entertain a motion. Brian?
I'll raise just one thing, something we've noticed. I think I heard that there was somebody from like a wildlife organization or something dialed in. We have noticed it looks like there's a breeding pair of foxes living down in there, and we see what might be a den. So I don't know if they'll need anything done on the wildlife end to maybe work around that or how that's handled, but just wanted to raise that for everyone's awareness.
Thank you. Is there If there's no other questions or comments from the panel, from the full DRB, is there a motion?
This is Dan Galindo. I will move to approve the application as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Would you consider a clarification regarding the location of the fencing to enable the access to Delgad's property and with the understanding that if there is need to repair, that would be damage to the walkway or the patio would be addressed as well by the applicant?
Yes, we would work with the resident there to make sure that both items were addressed.
And
Okay,
for
so
the motion and the second, would they consider those?
Sure, I'll accept that friendly amendment.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Seeing none, then the motion is passed.
Thank you all.
Thank you for that presentation. And
Right.
good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is the Lake Thoreau Pool.
So before we get to the Lake Thoreau pool, Bruce, if you, just a note that the first application item, I believe that the DRB will may need to defer that matter until the applicant and the affected party are present.
All right, and we're speaking of the Saffold Way. Just for clarification, do we need to take any action or as they're not here? Or we want to actively defer the application?
I would recommend deferring the application to the next available meeting to allow the applicant and the affected party to participate.
Okay. I so move. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? None, hearing none, the motion is passed. So now we're ready for Lake Thoreau Pool. Who will be presenting for this?
Larry, he's on meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to unmute myself there. Good evening, everybody. This is Larry Butler with Resident Association. And we have a rather interesting and I'd say, I don't want to say iconic application, but these don't come in front of the DRB all that often. This is the renovation, wholesale renovation of the Lake Thoreau Pool over off Sunrise Valley Drive and Upper Lakes Drive. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about how we got here. And with us tonight, we also have Chris Shoemaker, our Director of Capital Projects. We've got Ron Kagawa and Jeff Holzer from Kimley Horn, who are engineering and consultants, as well as Matt Stevenson and Jared Wilcox from LeMay Erickson Wilcox Architects, who are working on the pool building. Well, what I wanted to introduce is that this is the 5th pool that Resident Association has done a major renovation of. For those of you who have been around a long time, we've done Glade Pool, Hunter's Woods, Uplands, and Dogwood. So this is the next one in line. This pool was constructed in 1980 by Reston Land Corporation, and as with virtually all of our assets, was given to us. And it has basically outlived its useful life. And so we're coming in with a a request for preliminary approval of the overall concept. And I think it's important to note that this project started in 2019. We've had a lot of community engagement we had, charrettes and so forth. And so what you're seeing tonight is a result of, boiling down all the information we received over that time period, working with a number of resident association members and stakeholders. And we want to get your feedback on what we've got here to present to you tonight. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to turn it over to Jeff. Is that correct?
Yes.
Lee Horn. And so I would welcome Jeff to commence with the major slide deck that you have before you.
Excellent. Thank you, Larry. And thank you to the board here. Thank you for taking the time to review this package with us, and looking forward to fielding questions from you and others. So for those who are controlling the presentation, if you don't mind going kind of to the beginning slide, and we'll work through it to get towards the architectural improvements. But as Larry mentioned, yeah, from community charrettes that started in February of 2020, we evaluated the existing conditions of the site. There's many physical conditions that we're addressing as part of this redevelopment, as in regards to elevation change, RPA requirements, and accessibility is a key issue. And as well as balancing some requirements and priorities reflected from the community, we've developed this site plan and this package to reflect the improvements that is needed and wanted by the resident and the community. We've gone through the summer, through COVID, we pivoted to online charrettes to get a full vetted design. We worked through that through the fall, and then beginning of this year, we've been able to start our drawings to get this to a 50 to 60% level package for your review tonight. Overall, Thoreau Pool redevelopment, as I mentioned, is really trying to address the accessibility issues while maintaining the need of a accessible pool and amenities that the community values very deeply. As part of some additional Fairfax County requirements that we're addressing, we're bringing the property back up to code. In the 1970s, when this was originally developed, it was proposed for 25 parking spaces, and it was reduced to 16 of what is currently out there. And we're bringing it back up to 25 to meet some of the need that was brought up by the community of the popularity of this facility and needing more parking spaces. To do that, though, with the elevation challenge and with the many terracing levels that currently are out there between the children's pool, the main pool area, and the spa, all being on 3 separate pool deck levels, the intention of this design is to ultimately level out the use area of the parking lot, the pool, and the raised deck area to generally one elevation. So as you walk from your parking stall into the facility, through the building, and around the pool completely, there won't be any ramps or stairs or any kind of significant elevation change to ensure that the accessibility is easy for all users. To accomplish that required some renovations to the building, some additional upgraded equipment for the pump room, for the spa, and the pool itself, to ensure that we have the same amount of fixtures and accessibility internally to the building. We're proposing an additional expansion just north, kind of into the entrance plaza area of the site plan. Around the pool itself, we're including the spa a little closer to the building to ensure the pressure is compliant and operational effectively. The pool itself, its shape and its size is consistent to what's out there today. it's the same location. It's ultimately just being raised up in elevation to, again, make it accessible, but also not to drastically change the overall property limits. The diving well that's currently out there of what I would say is the northwest portion of that pool is being converted to a 0 depth entry. That was intended for the ability to maintain a use for children rather than a true dedicated children's pool. It helps with accessibility into the water to get into the deeper portions of the pool, which is on the north end of the pool, 4 feet to an 8-foot depth on the south. And as you move east, the current site plan has a terrace level of a lawn and a spa at 2 separate levels. The design to lift up the entire site plan around the pool for this raised deck allows us to increase the overall pool deck space for tables, chairs, and chase lounges. It allows us to have the landscape underneath be pervious to help support any RPA requirements or water quality impact as addressed for the Fairfax County. And it also ultimately gives us a great opportunity to capture the lake throw amenity that this is adjacent to, allowing us to give some focal amenity space to look out onto the lake itself. Lastly, as part of the improvements, because of lifting up the parking lot, and we're dealing with over nearly 20 foot of elevation change from west property line to east down to the lake, to reconnect the trail system that's currently going through the site, we're incorporating a staircase and a ramp encircling the overlook area to allow this circulation to drop back down onto grade to connect effectively. We're utilizing that necessity of dropping that elevation and including some retaining walls to lift up the parking lot to create an overlook amenity. That would be for public use, open year round for all of the community to be able to come here and enjoy the view shed out onto Lake Thoreau. We had a meeting last evening with some residents to address some of their comments and concerns, in particular with the overlook. But as with your input and other community questions, as these plans continue to develop, we're happy to field any questions and continue to develop this in regards to all the requirements of the DRB, Fairfax County, or any community needs. Lastly, I'll pass it to my teammate, Matt Stevenson with LeMay, Erickson Wilcox, and he can speak to the accessibility improvements to the architecture.
Thank you, Jeff. As mentioned, my name is Matt Stevenson. I'm a project manager with LeMay, Erickson Wilcox, and we're doing the pool renovation portion of this project. If you could scroll down, we've got an existing demo floor plan on here. Underneath these details, it's probably down towards the bottom of the PDF. The one with the red there. So this is a layout of the existing pool house. Luckily, we were able to find the existing drawings in the RA's archives. It's fairly strange configuration. There's a lot of dead space that's taken up by corridors, and these corridors are not meeting minimum clear dimensions for accessibility as well. The women's restroom was also not adequately sized for the fixture counts for what's required for a pool and a deck this size. So as Jeff had mentioned, our program was really to take this, as much of this sort of existing skeleton of this building as we can, including some of the internal posts that are coming down, the exterior frame and the pitched roof, and develop an addition that would pick up and allow us to expand this program a little bit, and would also allow us more space for the pool equipment room, which right now is undersized, and it's actually split between the pool and another outbuilding that houses the equipment for the spa. So if you could go down to the next slide, please. So this is what we've come up with, and we've got a larger pool equipment room to the southern end, planned south of the drawing here. It's accessible from both sides with easy egress to the parking area for getting in and out of there, any sorts of equipment. Both the men's room and the women's room have been expanded to represent the adequate number of fixtures for the pool sizing. We've provided some other spaces that have been asked for electrical and water heater, getting those out of the mechanical room. There's some concerns about pool equipment in the air, chemicals and things like that. So separating those uses made sense to us. The extension plan north here provides a nice sort of lobby area when you come in. There's 2 sliding doors that open and create a nice sense of openness on that corner there. There's a lifeguard check-in station and a roll-up window that will allow direct visual access from the lifeguard check-in station to the pool deck. And we were also able to include a family restroom there, which is a function that wasn't in the original building, but is an important function to have for this type of use. We've made a provision for some public art as you come into the space. And I think that this really kind of improves the flow of the entire experience coming through the lobby, past the lifeguard stations, into one of the 2 restrooms, and then out onto the pool deck. Next slide, please. This is actually the existing condition for the exterior of the building. It looks like it's a fiber cement panel siding in this nice sort of gray blue color with white trim. The existing gates out there are open metal, which is not ideal, we've been told, for the ability for varmint and leaves and things like that to get in there when it's closed, especially up for the season in the winter. So you'll see in our new design, we've replaced those with a sliding but opaque type door. If you can go to the next slide, please. So what we're advocating is really to try to pick up the language of the original architecture, both in material and in the idea of this one big shed roof. So we're coming off of the front north side of the property with another shed roof coming down. You can see the sliding doors on 2 of these elevations that provide that nice openness. They're clad right now with the same sort of fiber cement siding that you would see on the existing building and on the proposed addition. Although there have been some talks about possibly doing that in a nice wood or something to warm it up a little bit. The trim is going to be all white trim, shingle roof, just exactly like the existing building there. So our charge was really to create an architecture that was going to work with what was there, not feel like it was something new or any sort of insertion into the site, but really something that was going to be respectful of the existing architecture. You can also see some of the other features I mentioned, this roll-up window, which allows that visual access from the pool deck back into the lobby area. There's some lockers outside, drinking fountains outside. Next slide, please. And then we're going to get into just a couple details. So this is a side-by-side of the existing condition and then the new condition with the addition tying back up in there. And then the final slide that I've got is just some perspectives from the corners, and you can kind of see how the geometry of this new addition works with the existing geometry of the building. Thank you.
Okay. Let's start with some questions from the panel. And I note that, Scott, you've joined us. Any questions or comments?
Thanks, Bruce. So Lake Thoreau, as it currently, I think you have the parking and the existing structure are generally on the same elevation, and then there's a ramp that then takes you down to deck level. And so what that deck level is now being elevated. So is the finished floor of this addition or the interior improvements of the pool being changed?
The interior finished floor of the building will not be changed from what's existing. The pool deck and the parking is what's going to be lifted to meet that elevation.
So I guess that grading, is there a retaining wall about the perimeter of the pool deck, or is the site being regraded beyond that in the property line?
It's a good question. Thank you. The grading can be extensive as part of this project. Around the parking lot, we have retaining walls that envelop the overlook, as well as support the ramps that surround that overlook to get back down to grade. On the pool side, though, current plans because we were able to essentially peel that pool deck level back west, and ultimately in that space where currently the terrace lawn and the spa is currently located, we're able to slope that hillside at a 3-to-1 slope and tie back into existing grade that it is today. So for that pool deck portion on that east side, we don't need a retaining wall. We'll have a reinforced edge on that side, but not a retaining wall. We had anticipated that to be a retaining wall in initial concepts when we worked with the community through the summer, but through our grading and engineering, we've determined that a 3-to-1 slope can be accomplished without a retaining wall on that side. So that slope would be underneath the raised deck portion here on the site plan.
Okay. What's going to be the finish of those retaining walls?
Currently, they are concrete, but we're looking into decorative facade finishes to give it more of a character rather than a typical flush kind of finish.
Yeah, because the existing pool, when the siding ends, I'm pretty sure it's just a cast in place concrete exposed wall that is essentially like a large curb. Okay. I was just wondering because to be honest, when I heard you talk, it seemed expensive, like the amount of grading. But I think with what you're saying, I think it sounds like you guys have studied it. The second question I have is the building expansion. I'm sorry, but the roof, it looks like very different in geometry and form and footprint from the existing, because you have like a peak at the northwest corner of the building that then diagonally slopes southeast. But then you have a mono pitch roof for the addition that doesn't match the height of the peak. If you go to the roof plan, that was one other question. So you have this is perfect. So you have the roof, and then it kind of goes from northwest to southeast. So I guess my question was, if you match the peak and then went from northwest sloping, northeast, it almost seems like you'd be matching roof levels and fitting in. That's kind of a question. It goes back to some of the last 3Ds that you presented, Mr. Stevens.
Sure. Scott, we did actually look at that. Actually, can we look at the slide with the 3D renderings on it? Actually, one
more down.
Yeah. So we actually did study what that would feel like if this new addition were to have basically come up and meet the peak of the high point of that roof and come down, and then it could basically be like a gable, something sort of like that. It felt a little heavy to me, although I see where you're coming from.
I mean, I'm just like, this doesn't align with that, and the building is like very. I understand these sort of really monolithic buildings are interesting to work with. It's probably a diplomatic way of putting it, but again, just a question.
I think it's something that, because I know we actually have it in our Revit model, a study where we have that coming up and meeting that peak. So I mean, we could provide that.
Oh yeah, that's where I saw it.
When we did it and we looked at it, it felt a little bit heavy to me. But I do understand your comment, and
has a design
continue to study just exactly how that geometry is working up there.
I mean, if it doesn't impact your it seems like you're kind of constrained more or less to this you're like I think you were saying earlier that Mr. Holzer, that you're like trying to expand into that patio, making sure you're kind of maintaining that existing grade. I think that makes sense. I guess my final question I had was, the existing corridors of the existing pool. It's a good point. They probably take up like 15% of the floor plan, so it is like kind of a big hit to take on efficiency. But I think it's because like most pools in Reston have like quote unquote airport bathrooms where you don't have doors, but instead you have long corridors to and have private lines. I guess my question is more to like the doors and the hardware that you plan to use for the bathrooms, because I can imagine these are going to get like a lot of use and abuse over the course of like this was from the 80s. So ideally we're planning this out into 2040, 2050. So that was another question I had on the interior.
Valid question. We have not spec'd doors and hardware yet, but understanding that need and the amount of use that these are going to get, we can make sure that what we do spec is something that's going to be very hard wearing and have a very long life cycle.
Oh.
Yeah, it's tough too. I mean, I guess, sorry, keep going with questions, but I mean, the current building doesn't have any HVAC. It's like totally open air. Are you guys, that's another thing, it can be challenging with hardware and hinges. Like, is there going to be any, I imagine not, but you guys correct me if I'm wrong.
Not is the correct answer.
Yeah.
We're not planning on having this be mechanically cooled or heated. I'm sure we're going to need, a ridge vent, and there might be a fan up in the peak of the roof to pull out the hot air. But other than that, we're not planning on having any sort of a mechanical heating or cooling.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in the summertime. Because the existing buildings, it's like, there's no doors, it's open. So like air just passes by. So when it gets to be hot in the summer, it'll be with no AC. I don't know if you guys have studied that or if your MEP engineers have done any analysis, but again, I don't have an answer to that. That's just a question and more just a curiosity I have.
I think it's something we can continue to speak with our MEP engineers about, but our direction and what we've heard is that this is a pretty typical condition for all of the pools in Reston to be essentially open air. So
yeah,
make some accommodations to ensure that there's airflow getting through there. But we have not designed this or planned on having it mechanically heated or cooled.
Yeah, because only like in your plan, like for example, on the right-hand side, when you open the door, you immediately meet the side elevation of one of the toilet stalls in the women's bathroom. And so if like, it'll be more of like a user conversation with RA, I imagine, because then if it's really hot and the staff is like leaving the doors on with a kick stop and hold open, then it's just a privacy issue. But that's,
I could see actually changing that wall maybe into an actual wall, a partition. I think that might be a simple change that could put more privacy there.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for entertaining my questions, Bruce. That's all I've got right now.
Thank you. Karen?
Yeah, I agree with Scott's comments about the roof and also about the doors. And the doors seem very constraining. Imagine you got two kids with you and you're trying to get through a door with clothes and stuff, whatever it is. Anyway, it just feels constraining. So that would be a concern of mine. And I think those are my biggest concerns. I would like to also understand that the deck that is on the outside that is looks like it has slats. Can you go down to the colored site plan, please? It's probably up higher because
I
it's
think, yeah, further
there.
up the, yeah, slide 12.
Yeah, okay. So I understand, I understand the overlook and how that's all working and how the pool, you've put everything on the same level, which I think is a really helpful change. I'm just not understanding this kind of long triangular raised deck. I understand the raised deck, but I'm not sure what the level of it is. I understand the way you get to the overlook and back down, but I'm not sure how that plays into the raised deck.
Yeah, that's a good question for me to clarify on. So the raised deck itself, this portion on the site plan that is a brownish color with some blue squares on it that kind of represent the chase lounges on it.
Yes.
That's interior to the pool facility. So the pool code required fencing would be going around the perimeter of this. You would only be able to access this raised deck going through the building into the pool. So you've been, more or less checked into the pool facility. If you go to slide, I believe 13, there is a diagram of kind of this raised deck with a little more detail. So ultimately, it's going to be a steel structure with wood joists and planking on top as the deck, but that's ultimately all still the same level as the pool deck itself. So you'll be able to go, walk out of the locker rooms, walk past the pool, and all one level will be this raised deck that will butt it. And that's where, there'll be some additional seating availability. And then additionally, what's proposed is the east side of this deck, the angled portion of this deck that will be facing the lake. The proposed plans show for that to be a glass fence wall on that side to really maximize that view shed for users to be on that raised deck and be able to have some clear views out onto the lake rather than trying to look through chain link or some other picket fencing.
On the upper end, what you're saying is going to have, where is the glass?
The angled portion. So the piece that on this diagram in the bottom left corner, it's the narrowest point and it grows to the widest point in the top corner, that angled line, the right side of the graphic, east side.
Side
Yeah.
on the left of where it looks like there's a joint.
I'm sorry,
Jeff, this is Ron. Show on the site plan where the perimeter of the deck is located. That would be helpful.
So it will be the east side of the raised deck, the side that's adjacent to the lake, the angled portion of that side. That will be the glass fenced portion of the perimeter.
So what happens at the bottom where it looks like all of those that furniture smashes into each other?
So the narrowest point of the raised deck portion is 15 feet. So the arrangement of the furniture can ultimately be determined on site, when you're laying it out. But it was more of diagrammatically laid out to show that you could fit 2 rows of seats, one kind of angled position towards the pool, one really angled parallel to that angled glass fencing to really capitalize on that view shed to the lake.
Okay.
Those chase lounges are about 7 feet long, so it's a representation to show that you can fit a good amount of seating even in that narrow portion of the raised deck.
So those are all movable. They're not.
Yes.
Yes.
It's all up to whatever you want to make it.
Yes.
Yes.
Is it, and it's at the same level as the concrete around the pool deck?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
And
So-
just to, Karen, to expand on Jeff's comment, this is Ron. The logic of the glass rail is that if you're sitting down or if you're laying on the chaise lounge, partly reclined, if we had a fence there looking out to the pool, you would see a fence in front of you. And so we're trying very hard to keep that an open and clear view shed.
How high does that go above the
It's by code, it's between 30 and 40 inches high.
Oh, okay. So it's a regular.
Yeah, it's like handrail height. Yeah.
Okay. And then it goes all the way to and connects with the floor somehow?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Is it like you have a glass panel and it sits in a shoe? Or is it lifted
panel
off
between posts, right?
Yeah.
But like if you were going to take a squeegee to the deck, is it held off the deck so you?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All
Yeah,
right.
so like if we're going to squirt the deck off with a hose, the water will go underneath it.
Yeah.
And because the deck is cantilevered, it's pervious surface too, so it does not increase our pervious area.
So I guess, I'm sorry, Karen.
No, go ahead.
So are you back here? Is this retaining wall or slab on grade?
That's the portion that I elaborated on earlier, where we won't have a retaining wall. We'll have more of a reinforced edge of the pool deck just for foundational purposes, and then
It's
the
like a
3-to-1
perimeter beam?
slope.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you'll have a crawl space when this is
Yeah.
finished. You'll have a crawl space and then your glass railing. Okay.
The crawl space is under the whole thing?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay. And it slopes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You're standing on a slope and it's a what?
It'll be a 3-to-1 slope underneath there to tie back into existing grade. So we won't be expanding the grading or impacting any kind of the existing trees that are along that lake edge any more significantly than the wall is currently there. We'll be tying right back into that level.
Will you be?
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Karen. I'm sorry.
It's all right. I just so it's open underneath and it's like earth and mulch and stuff like that.
Well, currently, what we're doing, we're proposing to put flat stones under it with rails so that we can store water, kayaks and things underneath it if necessary.
So that gives the opportunity for some residents to be able to actually boat to the facility and store their boat underneath the deck and then check into the pool and then boat home.
What could be better than to kayak to the pool, go to the pool and kayak home, right?
Well, you have to have some arrangement where they can lock it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we have some details for tie downs for them on the slope.
So where do you put all these sheds, whatever?
The chaise lounges,
Yeah, where do those live when you're not?
Chris?
Do they mostly stay out?
Are you talking in terms of the off season?
Off season or I don't know. I'm just wondering if they go somewhere at some point or are they or do they always stay out?
During the active pool season, they just kind of remain on deck. The staff usually at the end of the evening will reposition all the chairs to kind of get it staged for the next morning. During the winterization process, they are stacked and then usually located somewhere in or close to the building and then locked and strapped down for security. And so they will not be out on the deck, the main deck area during the off season.
Okay. Scott, did you have something?
I guess I had one is like on the site plan. I understand, we're now meeting code with a number of parking spaces being provided, but the amount of impervious area of the site is also at least, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it appears to have increased. So do we have like a minimum? That's one thing, but I'm guessing this elevated deck is a part of meeting that requirement in terms of minimizing the amount of.
The elevated deck is pervious.
Yeah.
Because the water goes through it. Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we are gaining deck space, but keeping the impervious area very minimal in terms of change.
Okay, great. And so will you actually be able to see the lake?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
That's pretty killer. I mean,
Yeah.
and the existing pool, never been able to see the lake from it. So that'll be
I can't, we have been scratching our heads. We can't think of a project that you can land a chaise lounge at a public pool or a association pool like this and have a vista down the length of a lake like this.
And we're a big component of this project as well is trying to maintain as many trees as we can. That was well communicated by the community through our charrette process. Just by the nature of the redevelopment of this, some trees are coming out. We're right now proposing to remove 13. Most of them are due to the parking lot. If you recall, there is that strip of landscape between the parking and the sidewalk. There's 4 to 5 trees there, so those will be coming out. But ultimately, all the trees along the lake, on the south side, on the west side, they'll be remaining. Most of them on the north side. But especially those ones on the east side, we're looking to do selective pruning of some branches, also to help remove any invasive that may be present. So just to further help improve that vista opportunity to look out on the lake there.
Okay.
I have one other question about how you get from the building into the pool. You come out, you come through the building, you come out where the color changes.
I think slide 16 might be the most helpful to kind of walk through the building.
No, I wanted to talk about the outside, but this would probably work. So you come out where the 2 doors are from the locker rooms, or whatever you call the changing rooms, and then you've got a spa right away on this as you come out that door. So to get to the pool, you come out those changing room doors, and you have to walk all the way around the spa to get to the pool. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so the once you leave the building, if you go to slide 12, that might be actually the best one to look at it. As you come out of those doors of the locker rooms, you'll walk south and then turn east, make a left-hand turn as you're walking, and that will get you out onto the pool deck. The additional landscape strip there around the spa was intentional to, one, help minimize some of the screening ultimately of that mechanical room that's going to be positioned on that southern portion of the building, but also give a little bit of sense of privacy around that spa area to kind of amplify, a little bit more of that kind of current condition where they have their own kind of enclosure space. We're trying to somewhat be true to that kind of idea, but do it in a more kind of natural featured component.
So, but wouldn't you want to have the people coming out and going to the pool not having to walk behind you and all the way around?
We can take a look at that. And
I
maybe
mean, I
pass
just
through
thought
that.
it was curious,
Sure.
not a
Sure.
criticism
No,
exactly. It's,
I think that's a good comment.
It is.
That's a fair comment.
It's a good comment. And it's a good perspective, and it's ultimately a good essence of why we're here, to get some additional input on these sort of things as these
That's a
plans
fair
develop.
comment. We will take a look at that. One thing to note, Karen, when you get in the pool, you get in at a 0 depth entry. It's like a beach.
So then you've got to go from the doors, or do you go back? Do you go back through the?
No, you walk around the deck. Or of course you can get in on a swim
So
ladder.
that means that you have to walk all the way down around the spa and then back to the 0 depth entry.
Yes.
Ah,
There will be additional ladders as you would see at
Yeah.
other pools that will be positioned that will allow other access points.
You're welcome to enter at the, at the other end also.
right, but then you'd be going, I mean, it wouldn't be a natural. Anyway,
It's an interesting point. I didn't think about the circulation.
Yeah.
Karen.
it just seems, you could always mark it off into 10 feet lengths and they can use it for exercise. Just kidding. So thank you.
No diving well.
No diving well.
A bummer for the kids.
Okay. Dan or Michael?
I had two questions. So there's currently a area for kids to kind of wade in, and there's a spa roughly in the same location, but that's not intended to have the same function, correct?
Correct. The wading pool that's currently located where the spa is relatively shown in this diagram is ultimately modified to be achieved through the zero depth entry.
As during the public input process, it was determined that the spa and the zero depth entry were more important than the wading pool.
Okay.
That was the sentiment of people. Yeah. You said you had another question also?
Yeah, if staff could go to the slide with the 4 elevations on it. I think it's that one. Double check on mine. But basically, I just want to have a question about the roof. So on the addition, there's a small area where it comes back down, kind of counter to everything else going up and crossing. And I was wondering why that choice was made. Go to the next one with the new.
Yeah.
Instead of maybe just carrying that roof line up so that you would have a little bit more, I don't know, dynamism between the two kind of opposing angles.
I like it. Well, I don't think we're married to that little can't back down at all. So I mean, we're certainly willing to take a look at that.
Okay, I'd recommend it. I mean, I think maintaining what you have now and doing that, I think would complement the existing and the new at the same time. So that was my other one. Thank you.
Thank you. And any other further comments, Michael? Did you have a comment?
Nothing
Question?
I'm excited to see the finished grading plan. And Scott had brought up and discussed the overhang that I was curious about, what the plan was for that void space below. But the kayak storage and whatnot sounds like a good idea. So I'm excited to see the final details.
Okay. We're asked tonight for concept approval and concept. Is there, you've heard some things this evening, and so my question, particularly about several things, but the roof in particular, I was wondering from the applicant's point of view, whether you would want to address that or have us defer to you address those, or trying to get a sense of whether we could approve in concept, given, but have those things to be considered. How significant we think those are that we could approve, but in concept only, and have those things to be considered.
Yeah,
This is really a question for the board.
Bruce,
I'm sorry.
This is Larry. Yeah, so I think, we asked for, preliminary site approval essentially, and, preliminary architectural. I think we're beyond the purely conceptual level. I mean, obviously we're at about 60% plan effort here, and this is based upon all the public input we've gotten. I think the comments about the roof, that's certainly something that, Matt and his team can study and come back with those kind of details. But in terms of the overall site, I mean, the progression of this project, we need to continue moving forward because there's so many, frankly, site details. I think the architecture, people are generally okay with the overall intent of, the addition for the additional space and, things like that, I think certainly those are things we can work on. But really from the site standpoint, with respect to the parking, the pervious deck, if you will, and the overlook and things like that, because we need to continue to advance these plans. And so I don't know if that's helpful, but we're certainly willing to take a look at those things. And, you know, some great comments about the circulation piece where the, you know, spa is located and things like that as well.
No, I appreciate that, Larry. What I was trying to get to a point where we could put together the right motion, and my notes had suggested that this was for a concept approval, but am I understanding that you're looking for approval on the site plan and a preliminary approval on the architecture? Is that what you have in mind, Larry?
Well, I would like that better, but we're really preliminary site approval and architectural, recognizing we still have some final details to work out. I think concept, you know, at 60%, you know, the effort where they're at right now, I don't think, you know, concept is probably the right term. I think preliminary site and architecture is probably more appropriate.
Okay. So just clarifying what we would be putting together in a motion, preliminary on site and architecture is what you have in mind, Larry?
Yes.
All right. So with that in mind, and having heard the discussion, does the board have proposed motion? Anyone?
I can move to conceptually approve the site plan and the architecture subject to design review board's comments and recommendations at tonight's meeting.
I'll second that.
So just for clarification, the request from the RA was beyond concept. They're saying they would like preliminary, and these are distinctions that I'm not sure we made before, but RA was asking for preliminary approval for both architecture and site plans, and presumably with the request that the RA consider the recommendations and regarding the circulation, the roof, and anything else that was discussed this evening by the DRB.
So
the distinction I'm making is Larry's concern about moving beyond concept to preliminary. That's what I'm
happy to amend the motion to include preliminary, but I would ask staff if there's a distinction between the two that I'm just not aware of. Whatever the appropriate terminology is for preliminary approval, I'm happy to amend my motion to include it.
It would be is either conceptual or approved site plan to include design and architectural components. So what it is leaving out, what we would ask for is we would approve things like the parking lot, the elevated decking, the fencing, the siding, but we would ask for more details on the roofing, the circulation, materials and colors, fixtures, a landscape plan, and artwork, such as that. So there are some things that we would go ahead and approve that have to do with site and architecture, and other things that we would ask for further information on. But preliminary and conceptual are basically the same. It's a straight up approval of site plan is what I think Larry's looking for.
Approval of this site plan and this schematic design, and just everyone knows there is a potential DRB member in attendance that recommended that language. So if that's helpful, he's an architect.
Okay, so I will amend my motion to provide approval of the site plan and schematic with preliminary approval for the architecture of the expanded building on the site. And I'm going to say that because I don't think the board's comments were really overly oriented towards the actual schematic design of the site, but if I'm wrong, y'all can correct me. I think it was mostly about the building.
I agree. I mean, the mechanical space isn't shifting, the location and footprint of the pool, the deck, the grading. It seems like the big blocks and design elements you guys have developed we have no, comments on them. It's mostly like, can you nudge a wall to align with the building expansion and maybe do something with the roof slope? I mean, Larry, is that a critical path item on your schedule?
I think as Lisa described it, I mean, it's essentially the same thing. We just, all the work we put into getting to this layout for the site, the shape of the pool, the orientation, one level grade, the ADA requirements for the parking lot, building, and so forth. It's those things that we need to advance the design on to keep the project moving. So I think we can get that with the approval or the motion as stated, recognizing we've got to come back and address a number of those comments that you all have made.
Yeah, I think we understand each other.
Great. Dan had made that motion, amended his motion, and was the second.
I'll second again. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion from board? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye, or should we raise your hand here?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm seeing any nays? Seeing none, no abstentions, seeing none, the motion is passed. Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And thank you for.
Great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Great comments and questions as well.
Terrific.
Appreciate it.
Okay. The next thing on our agenda is a brief executive session. And with that, we would, for a few minutes, be offline, and then we would return to hear the last item on the agenda, which is the Vantage Hill application. I guess it's an appeal.
Mhm.
Is that understood for all our folks that are watching? So we're going to move into executive session now. Thank you.
Do we need a motion to go to executive session or no?
Yes.
Well,
All right. I move to enter executive session
To consult with legal counsel.
with legal counsel. Thank you, Cam.
Dan,
Thank
I'll
you.
second that.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Karen, I'm not seeing Karen, so
Here, sorry.
that's fine. Are you voting with the A? Are you voting with the motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any nays? No, hearing none. Motion's passed, and we'll move into executive session. Thank you.
Okay, everyone should have a little screen pop up that says breakout room.
Now, do we select that?
Yep.
Is that what we
Yep.
have to do?
Go ahead, select that, Karen.
Okay.
Jane, could you move me in?
Okay, I need to verify that all the ERB members have returned.
Let's see, we've got,
See, Michael,
I'm still looking.
thank you.
Dan, Scott,
See Scott and Dan now.
Bruce. Looking for Karen. And Mike. Okay, see Mike looking for Karen.
Karen is still in the room, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
There's about 35 seconds left and then she'll probably be out.
Yeah.
Okay, the room is closed.
Okay, Karen's out.
All right. I would, having entered an executive session, I'd like to make a motion that the Design Review Board certifies to the best of each and every one of their individual knowledges that only matters appropriate for executive session were heard and discussed in executive session, that being the nature of the consultation with counsel. Is there a second to that motion?
So
I'll
Dan, I
second.
was, okay.
Oh, sorry, Dan.
No, you got it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? None. None?
None.
No abstentions? The motion passed.
Do we,
Okay.
do we select joined breakout room or
I think we're,
having different things here on here?
No, Karen, you can ignore it.
I can ignore it
okay.
and I just,
Click
Okay.
that.
how do I get back?
You are back.
I'm back, thank you.
Okay. We're going to move forward with we have appeals for Vantage Hill. I'd like to know whether Mr. Farbrother is here.
Yes, just a moment, please.
I'm here.
Terrific. Would you like to please take us through your appeal? At this point, you understand it very well that we're looking for your explanation of whether there are misapplied guidelines or new facts. First, we'll hear, before we hear any of the underlying issues, we have to determine whether there is a basis for an appeal.
I understand.
Thank you.
In fact, when I submitted my letter, I had put it in the order of misapplication of guideline first. I'm actually contending that there's a misapplication of guideline and new information. If it's okay, I'd like to start with the new information first, even though that's out of order of my letter. So what I'm saying here is that, we talked in the previous meetings about RELAC, and the applicant had said that they didn't want to use that system. I had looked into the rest in deed language, and you can see it in my letter. I won't drag you through each point there, but essentially that the deed requires that air conditioning units, which does refer to RELAC, that any residential cluster in which central air conditioning service is available to the lot line, no individual air conditioning units of any type shall be permitted. I thought this was relevant because the developer had chosen not to use RELAC and is in fact providing individual air conditioning units. I have read the letter provided by the applicant's attorney about the fact that Vantage Hill is not considered a cluster and therefore is not governed by this requirement. I don't know. I'm not an attorney, so I don't know if that's true. I do still want to discuss this point because while it may be true that Vantage Hill itself is not a cluster that would be governed by this, when the property is split off, I'm curious then what will this new townhouse development be if not a new cluster? And if that's the case, the RELAC line passes right through that property and seems like the deed would still apply. So that's my new information. I don't know if I should pause there for a discussion or if I should go forward with my contention of the misapplication of the guidelines.
Why don't you proceed and we'll look at the whole appeal.
Okay. So this one, I'm going to go ahead and read more or less directly from my letter. So during the entire review of the Vantage Hill Townhouse project, the board made little to no mention of which specific guideline was being used to determine the appropriateness of the project. And I found that the decision letter really had no additional insight. And I feel like that lack of reference to any guideline is arguably a misapplication of the guidelines as a whole. Without using the design guidelines as a basis for the review of a project, the board is left to make entirely subjective decisions on a project by project basis. And this method of design review risks ignoring and undermining the fundamental purpose of the guidelines, which is to provide consistent design quality over time and across all of Reston. And maintaining that consistency of contextually sensitive design is the critical function of the design review board. This consistency or precedence as applied to the design of the community is not a boogeyman, as one board member characterized it. It is what distinguishes Reston from all of the surrounding communities. By establishing clear goals and requirements, the design guidelines help to shift the review process from a completely subjective effort to something more objective. Rather than having to determine whether a project is appropriate based on individual tastes or whether it is the best a designer can do, the guidelines provide specific goals against which a proposed project's qualities can be measured. And in this case, I think the specific guideline that applies to this project is clearly the redevelopment guideline. And a review of that guideline shows multiple instances where the approved design simply and objectively does not meet that standard. And I'm quoting from the guidelines here. The objective and goal of the guideline is to ensure that redevelopment of Reston property continues the existing contextual balance and is in harmony with and enhance neighboring properties in the community. Neighborhood character. The proposed redevelopment must be sensitive to its effect on or alteration of the established character of the neighborhood. Detrimental effect. The proposed redevelopment should not detrimentally impact neighboring properties, especially residential neighborhoods, by its pedestrian or vehicular traffic, noise, lighting, and other associated activity. I contend that this proposed design fails on virtually all of the points of the guidelines stated objective. But to evaluate that, you can't look at the application and the project in isolation. You have to look at what the actual context of the neighborhood is. I'd hope that the DRB members have had an opportunity to come look at Wainwright Drive and all of the neighborhoods on it. But looking at recently published draft report documenting a survey of potential historic districts can provide insight into the unique and special planning that created several of the clusters on this street. The survey finds that 3 of the developments on Wainwright Drive, Colson Cluster, Wainwright Cluster, and Mediterranean Cluster are potentially eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. In the case of 2 of these clusters, the quality of inward-facing housing units surrounded by trees was a defining characteristic. As mentioned in that report, Colson Cluster has a buffer of trees on all sides and a small grassy park without trees on an island in the pavement, and has a strong orientation to public space. The report points out that Robert Simon's philosophy of creating communities through interaction is evident. Likewise, the townhouses of Wainwright cluster are oriented around common green space and set within a wooded parcel to provide a buffer from other uses and provide attractive views from the unit's large windows. While not surveyed in the report, Governor's Square employs a similar strategy of townhouse units surrounding a large common space. That neighborhood is in turn surrounded by a significant buffer of trees. In all three cases, in addition to the community spaces, the townhouses all enjoy more private outside spaces, such as patios, decks, and balconies. In contrast, Mediterranean cluster trades open communal space for large private courtyards, both in the front and the rear of the properties. And similarly, Quartz cluster units have private rear yards. And although it does not have significant common green space, Quartz cluster does have a shared amenity in the tennis courts that give the community its name. In summary, all of the neighboring properties all have either large landscaped common areas, private outside space for each unit, or both. The proposed redevelopment ignores all of that context. While the final proposal did provide some attempt at a tree buffer between Wainwright Drive and the row of townhouses, the units along Vantage Hill has only a single row of trees separating from the street. This is a far cry from the significant buffers that separate the other clusters on the street. The approved proposal provides a token communal gathering space tucked away out of sight of the majority of the units. Its inclusion is clearly an afterthought in response to earlier public comments and provides no significant benefit to the would-be owners of those townhouses and is not part of a well-integrated design strategy. And finally, the units have zero private outdoor space beyond a decorative balcony that appears to be barely deep enough to stand on and enjoys only views of an alleyway. This type of design merely gestures at amenities and characteristics of a high-quality development. It acknowledges that these elements should be there, but stops short of actually providing them in any meaningful way. This is not the design strategy that seeks to create a community within its bounds or to enhance the surrounding communities. It's the design strategy of a product to be sold to people that the sellers never have to see again. The development abandons all reference to any of its surrounding context. But it doesn't do this as some well-developed scheme to act as a counterpoint to the rest of the neighborhood. It does not acknowledge the context and decide to throw out the old rule book to develop something unique and special. It simply ignores the context out of necessity to squeeze in as many units as possible. This doesn't respect its context and does nothing to enhance the neighborhood. And regarding the guidelines reference to the detrimental effects of the proposed development's vehicular traffic, the increased number of vehicles that come with this type of project is not necessarily an issue in and of itself. However, the proposed design provides minuscule driveways connecting the alleyways to the garages. It is more common than not for people to use their garages for any number of uses other than parking cars. But with no driveways or an ability to park within the alleyway, it's inevitable that this development will result in more cars parked out along the curbs of Wainwright Drive. In total, all of these issues demonstrate that the DRB's decision to approve this development as proposed was made without consideration for the key requirements of the design guideline for redevelopment. In other words, the guideline was misapplied.
Okay, thank you. So we have two issues for the discuss in terms of the appeal. And I would like to have a input from the board on the misapplied guidelines initially. Is there a question or comment regarding the concern about the misapplied guidelines from the DRB?
I have a question. I noticed that none of the concerns that have been expressed in these responses, there's no mention of Vantage Hill, which is, of course, part of this whole thing. So how does that fit in with that? Because they're quite different than all of the other ones that you were talking about.
Is that a question to the appellant?
That's a question to, well, I would say it would be a question to you because you were the one who's been doing the analysis of that.
Can we, I think your question is being directed to Graham Farrel, who's the person who appealed. Is that correct, Karen?
That's correct.
Can we unmute?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, frankly, I don't feel it's necessarily my role to just define the context of the whole neighborhood. But since I've gone so far as to do it at this point, I would also contend that Vantage Hill, it follows some of the same model. All of those units are facing inward to larger open spaces. There are numerous little congregation areas and gazebos, and open space, and it's tucked away from the street. You're not even aware as you drive down Wainwright Drive that there's a huge development back there. So I think it fits very much in line with the rest of the neighborhood. And I don't think the new development, the proposed development, fits within that context. And arguably, I mean, none of the Vantage Hill residents, I think, are against it, but they are some of the most impacted ones, particularly the building that's going to be sitting right next to this new development, to be almost able to reach out their window and touch some of these buildings. It's surprising to me that the residents of Vantage Hill are not more against it. I don't know if I've addressed your question.
Yeah, it seems as though they're party to this whole thing, so.
With respect to the specific issue of whether DRB misapplied the guideline by not applying the requirement for considering the existing contextual balance, et cetera, it speaks in terms of neighboring properties. And I think, if I'm understanding correctly, the appeal was based on the neighboring properties other than Vantage Hill. Is that correct? Mr. Farr, brother?
We can't hear you,
I
I think.
right. I mean, certainly when I was writing my letter, I was assuming that Vantage Hill wasn't part of the consideration because they're the ones who applied. But I still
they're not
think,
a neighboring. You're not considering them a neighboring property. You're considering them the same property.
yeah, but I think the point is fine. They will become a neighboring property
Yeah.
if the property is subdivided, and I think Vantage Hill fits into the context of the overall neighborhood. So I'm happy to include them into the consideration. I think it still applies. I just didn't do it at the time because, like I said, I was assuming they were the ones who were applying, so they didn't necessarily need to be a part of the analysis.
Understand. And any other questions or comments about this application of the guideline?
I think Mr. Mr. Farbrother, I agree with him. I think his appeal is clearly articulated. I think it precisely diagnoses concerns and issues, both contextually and locally within the project. I think it's overall accurate and insightful, and I agree with the appeal.
Any other comments? None others. Scott, I agree. I would find a misapplication, and I would entertain a motion. And the reason I'm not addressing the second is if we hear the appeal on this issue, we will not have to address the RELAC issue at this point. So is there a motion with respect to the appeal on the issue of misapplied guideline?
Sorry, Bruce, are you asking other board members what?
Yes,
their-
I'm asking if there is a motion on that issue. And as I said, it would address, if it were to pass or not, if it were not to pass, we would address the RELAC question. If that's approved, then the appeal would be granted and we'd be starting with a new application. At de novo, we would as if we were starting over on the application.
Okay.
You mean on the application, the original application?
The original, right. If we grant, that would be granting the appeal.
Mhm. Okay.
I'm personally comfortable with granting the appeal, but I don't know if all board members have spoken at this point.
I was asking if there were further questions or comments about the issue of the misapplied guideline from any other members of the DRB.
I don't have any others. I just, I don't, do we still have the other people that we had before?
Dan and Michael?
I'm here. I do not necessarily have a comment on the appeal itself. Essentially, I'd be willing to support hearing the appeal if the rest of the board was interested in it.
All right.
I would say likewise to that.
Okay, then just in the interest of moving things, I would move to grant the appeal on the issue of misapplied guidelines.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please raise their hand and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, no abstentions, then the appeal is granted. And then with that, we will.
Mr. Chair, I would move to defer consideration of the appeal to the full DRB meeting in May.
There a second?
Second.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstain? Then the motion is granted and we will defer the hearing de novo on the application to the May full design review board. That was the final item on our agenda. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn our meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.